The morning sun cast long shadows across the military academy grounds as Sarah Chen walked through the iron gates for the first time. She carried a single duffel bag over her shoulder, her steps quiet and measured. The building before her stood 5 stories tall, its red brick facade weathered by decades of training the nation's future officers. Sarah was 28 years old, though she had told the admissions office she was 22. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes were deliberately plain, a faded blue t-shirt and worn jeans. Nothing about her appearance suggested what she truly was. The academy's entrance hall buzzed with activity. Young cadets rushed past her, their voices excited and nervous. Most of them were fresh out of high school, their eyes bright with dreams of military glory. Sarah moved through the crowd like a ghost, observing everything, noticed by few. She had learned long ago how to blend in, how to become invisible when necessary. It was a skill that had kept her alive in places most of these kids couldn't imagine. At the registration desk, a tired-looking officer checked her paperwork. His name tag read Officer Martinez. He barely glanced at her face as he stamped her documents and handed her a room assignment. Sarah was placed in the North Dormitory, room 412, 4th floor. She thanked him quietly and made her way toward the residential building. The dormitory hallways smelled of fresh paint and floor wax. Sarah found her room at the end of the corridor. Inside, 3 beds were arranged against the walls, each with a small desk and locker. 2 of the beds were already occupied with belongings. Colorful posters hung on the walls, and music played softly from a small speaker. Sarah chose the empty bed by the window and began unpacking her minimal belongings. She was folding her second shirt when the door burst open. 2 young women entered, laughing loudly. They stopped when they saw Sarah, their conversation dying mid-sentence. The taller one had blonde hair, styled in perfect waves, and wore designer athletic wear. Her name was Jennifer Morrison, though everyone called her Jen. The other girl was shorter, with red hair and a face full of freckles. This was Emma Rodriguez. Jen looked Sarah up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Oh, they gave us another roommate," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I thought we were going to get the room to ourselves." Sarah nodded politely. "I'm Sarah. Nice to meet you both." Emma smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Where are you from?" "California," Sarah replied simply. It wasn't technically a lie. She had been stationed in California between deployments. Jen sat on her bed and pulled out her phone, clearly dismissing Sarah from her attention. "Well, just so you know, Emma and I have been friends since prep school. We pretty much run things around here. Our families have military connections going back generations." Sarah continued unpacking, saying nothing. She had encountered people like Jen before. They existed everywhere in every level of society. Their confidence came from privilege, not from actual accomplishment. Sarah had learned not to judge too quickly. She also knew how to recognize trouble when she saw it. The first week passed in a blur of orientation. Activities and basic training exercises. The academy was designed to test cadets physically and mentally, preparing them for future military service. For Sarah, the workouts were laughably easy. While other cadets struggled with 5-mile runs, Sarah barely broke a sweat. During obstacle course training, she completed challenges in record time, but always made sure to slow down before finishing, deliberately adding extra seconds to appear merely competent rather than exceptional. She observed the social dynamics carefully. Jen and Emma had quickly established themselves as leaders among the female cadets. They had a way of making others feel small, of turning simple conversations into opportunities for mockery. A group of male cadets orbited around them, led by a young man named Derek Hastings. Derek was tall and athletic, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. His father was a 3-star general, a fact he mentioned frequently. Sarah kept to herself mostly, speaking only when necessary. During hand-to-hand combat training, she deliberately performed at an average level, careful not to demonstrate her true capabilities. When firearms training began, she intentionally missed several targets, earning disappointed looks from the instructors. At night, while her roommates gossiped and made plans, Sarah would lie in her bed and stare at the ceiling, thinking about why she was really here. 3 months earlier, Sarah had been called into a classified briefing at Naval Special Warfare Command. Her commanding officer, Captain Williams, had presented her with an unusual assignment. Intelligence had suggested that someone within the military academy was leaking sensitive information to foreign operatives. The leak was sophisticated, untraceable through normal channels. They needed someone on the inside, someone who could infiltrate the cadet population without raising suspicion. Sarah was ideal for the mission. She could pass for younger than her actual age, and her records could be sanitized to create a believable cover story. More importantly, she had the skills to protect herself if things went wrong. Sarah had spent 6 years as a Navy SEAL, one of the few women to complete the notoriously brutal training program. She had served in combat zones across 3 continents, earning commendations that would never appear on any public record. But here at this academy, she was just another cadet. Just another face in the crowd. The trouble started during the 3rd week. Sarah was in the library researching for a tactics paper when Jen and her group approached. There were 5 of them: Jen, Emma, Derek, and 2 other male cadets named Brad and Kyle. They surrounded the table where Sarah sat, their faces showing a mixture of amusement and malice. Jen leaned against the table. "We've been watching you, Sarah. You're weird. You don't talk to anyone. You don't go to any parties. You don't even try to make friends." Sarah looked up calmly. "I'm here to learn, not socialize." Derek laughed. "Hear that? She's here to learn. Like she's better than the rest of us." "I didn't say that," Sarah replied evenly. Emma circled around behind her. "You know what I think? I think you're hiding something. Maybe you cheated your way in here. Maybe your application was full of lies." Sarah felt a familiar coldness settle over her. It was the same feeling she got before combat, a clarity that came when danger approached. But she couldn't react the way her training demanded. She had to maintain her cover. She had to appear vulnerable. "I'm not hiding anything," she said quietly. Jen smiled. "We'll see about that. This academy has traditions, Sarah. New cadets need to prove themselves. Need to show they belong here." Brad cracked his knuckles. "Yeah, we have a little initiation for people who don't fit in." Sarah gathered her books slowly. "I'm not interested in your traditions." As she stood to leave, Kyle blocked her path. He was the largest of the group, over 6 feet tall and heavily muscled. "Nobody said you could leave." For a moment, Sarah considered her options. She could disable all 5 of them in under 30 seconds. She knew exactly where to strike, how much force to use, but that would end her mission immediately. Instead, she took a step back. "Please move," she said. Derek pushed Kyle aside and got close to Sarah's face. "You think you're tough? Tomorrow night, midnight, come to the roof of the North Dormitory. We'll see how tough you really are, and if I don't," Sarah asked. Jen's smile widened. "Then we'll make your life here a living hell. We'll make sure every instructor knows what a fraud you are. We'll find out all your secrets, Sarah." They left her standing there, their laughter echoing through the library. Sarah waited until they were gone, then sat back down. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm. She had been in far more dangerous situations than this. But something about their threat bothered her. The way Jen had said, secrets suggested they might already suspect something that night. Sarah lay awake while her roommate slept. Through her window, she could see the academy grounds bathed in moonlight. The rooftop of the dormitory was visible from her angle, a flat expanse surrounded by a low wall. She understood now what they were planning. It was a common hazing ritual, forcing someone to stand on the edge of the roof, testing their nerve. Sometimes they would push the person slightly, watching them panic. What they didn't know was that Sarah had done hundreds of high-altitude insertions, had rappelled down cliffs in total darkness, had learned to control fear in ways they couldn't comprehend. But she couldn't show them that. She had to appear frightened, had to play the victim. The next day dragged slowly. Sarah attended her classes, participated in training exercises, and avoided Jen's group whenever possible. She could feel their eyes on her throughout the day, watching, waiting. Other cadets had noticed the tension and gave her sympathetic looks. A few tried to warn her to stay away from Jen and Derek, But Sarah just nodded and said nothing. As midnight approached, Sarah made her decision. She would go to the roof. She would let them have their moment of power, but she would be ready for whatever they planned. She changed into dark clothes and soft-soled shoes. In her pocket, she carried her phone, set to record audio. If things went too far, she would at least have evidence. The dormitory was quiet as Sarah climbed the stairs to the 5th floor. A maintenance access door led to the roof, usually locked, but someone had propped it open with a brick. Sarah pushed through and stepped out into the cool night air. They were waiting for her. 7 of them now, not just 5. Jen and Emma stood near the center of the roof. Derek, Brad, Kyle, and 2 other cadets Sarah didn't recognize formed a loose semicircle. Their faces were hard to read in the darkness, but she could sense their excitement, their anticipation. Jen stepped forward. "I'm surprised you actually came. I thought you might chicken out." Sarah said nothing. She walked calmly toward the center of the roof, her expression neutral. Derek moved to block her path. "The initiation is simple. You walk to the edge of the roof, climb up on the wall, and stand there for 5 minutes. That's it." Sarah looked toward the edge. The wall was about 3 feet high, just enough to prevent accidental falls. Beyond it, a 4-story drop to the concrete below. It would be fatal for anyone who fell. "And if I refuse?" Sarah asked. Emma laughed. "Then we carry you over there and throw you off ourselves." The others laughed too, but there was an edge to it. Sarah realized they weren't entirely joking. These weren't just spoiled kids playing a prank. There was real malice here, real danger. She wondered if this was connected to her mission, if somehow they had discovered who she really was. Sarah walked toward the edge without another word. She heard surprised murmurs behind her. They had expected pleading, tears, resistance. Instead, she moved with calm purpose. When she reached the wall, she placed both hands on the rough concrete and pulled herself up smoothly. She stood on the narrow ledge, perfectly balanced, and looked out over the academy grounds. The wind whipped Sarah's hair around her face as she stood on the narrow wall. For stories below, the concrete courtyard looked gray and distant in the moonlight. Behind her, the group had gone quiet. They hadn't expected her to climb up so quickly, so confidently. Sarah kept her eyes forward, her breathing steady, counting the seconds in her head. Derek was the first to speak. "Well, look at that. Maybe she's got some guts after all." Sarah didn't respond. She simply stood there, arms relaxed at her sides, weight perfectly distributed. The wall was only about 8 inches wide, but she had balanced on much narrower surfaces during mountain warfare training. Once, in Afghanistan, she had crossed a collapsed bridge that was barely 4 inches wide. With a 100-foot drop on either side, this was nothing. After a minute, Jen's voice cut through the darkness. "Okay, that's enough. You can come down now." Sarah turned her head slightly. "You said 5 minutes?" Emma laughed nervously. "Yeah, but we were just kidding. You proved your point." But Sarah remained where she was. She had decided to use this moment to turn their game against them. If she showed weakness now, they would never stop. They would keep pushing, keep testing, and eventually they might discover the truth about her. Better to establish dominance now, in a way that wouldn't reveal her true capabilities. For minutes passed, then 5. Sarah finally stepped down from the wall with the same fluid grace she had used to climb up. She turned to face the group, her expression unchanged. Derek seemed unsure how to respond. "That was pretty ballsy," he admitted. "I'll give you that." Brad stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "I don't think she's learned her lesson yet. I think she needs a real scare." Before anyone could react, Brad rushed toward Sarah. His intention was clear. Push her back toward the edge, make her lose her balance, watch her panic. It was a move born of ego and stupidity, the action of someone who had never faced real consequences. Sarah saw him coming. Time seemed to slow, the way it always did in moments of danger. Her training took over, muscle memory built from thousands of hours of practice. But she couldn't use her full skills. She had to make it look accidental, natural. As Brad's hands reached for her shoulders, Sarah twisted her body just enough. His momentum carried him past her. She stuck out her foot, a movement so subtle it could have been a stumble. Brad's shin caught her ankle. He pitched forward with a yelp of surprise, arms windmilling. He managed to catch himself on the wall, breathing hard, his eyes wide with the sudden realization of how close he had come to going over. Kyle rushed forward and pulled Brad back from the edge. "What the hell, man? You could have died." Brad turned on Sarah, his face twisted with rage. "You tripped me. You did that on purpose." Sarah raised her hands. "I didn't move. You charged at me and lost your balance." Derek stepped between them. "Everyone calm down. This has gone far enough." But Jen's eyes had narrowed. She was watching Sarah with new interest, a calculating look on her face. "That was interesting," she said softly. "The way you moved just then, that wasn't the reaction of someone who's scared." Sarah met her gaze. "I didn't move." He tripped over his own feet. Emma looked between them, sensing the tension. "Come on, Jen, let's just go. The initiation is over." But Jen took a step closer to Sarah. "I don't think so. I think there's more to you than you're letting on. Nobody stands on that wall like it's nothing. Nobody stays that calm." Sarah felt the situation spiraling. She needed to diffuse it, needed to give them a plausible explanation. "My father was a construction worker," she said quietly. "I grew up on job sites, walking on scaffolding and beams. Heights don't bother me." It was partially true. Her father had been a builder, though he had died when Sarah was 12. The lie was close enough to the truth to be believable. Derek seemed satisfied with this explanation. "See, mystery solved. Can we all go to bed now?" But as the group began to disperse, Sarah noticed that Jen was still watching her. The blonde cadet had the look of someone who had just found a puzzle she intended to solve. Sarah realized she had made a mistake. By not showing fear, by handling the situation too well, she had drawn exactly the kind of attention she needed to avoid. The next few days were tense. Jen and her group kept their distance, but Sarah could feel them watching her. During training exercises, they would position themselves nearby, observing how she moved, how she responded to challenges. Sarah tried to dial back her performance even more, deliberately fumbling with equipment, asking basic questions she already knew the answers to. On Thursday afternoon, Sarah was called to the commandant's office. Colonel Hendricks was a severe woman in her 50s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She gestured for Sarah to sit. "Cadet Chen," the colonel began, "I've received a complaint about you." Sarah's expression remained neutral. "What kind of complaint, ma'am?" "Several cadets witnessed an incident on the dormitory roof last weekend. They say you were involved in some kind of hazing ritual. They also say another cadet nearly fell because of your actions." Sarah chose her words carefully. "I was asked to meet some classmates on the roof, ma'am. Another cadet charged at me and lost his balance. I didn't push him or touch him." Colonel Hendricks studied her for a long moment. "The other cadets tell a different story. They say you deliberately tripped him." "That's not accurate, ma'am." The colonel leaned back in her chair. "I've been reviewing your file, Cadet Chen. Your performance here has been inconsistent. Your physical fitness scores are adequate but not exceptional. Your academics are average. Yet some of your instructors have noted moments where you seem to know more than you should." Sarah's pulse quickened, though her face showed nothing. "I study hard, ma'am. I take my education seriously. It's commendable," the colonel said. "But I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've learned to recognize when someone isn't showing their full capabilities. The question is why?" Sarah met her gaze steadily. "I don't understand what you're suggesting, ma'am." Colonel Hendricks stood and walked to the window. "This academy has a problem, Cadet Chen. We've had several security breaches over the past year. Classified information has been leaked. Documents have gone missing. Someone here is passing intelligence to people who shouldn't have it." Sarah's mind raced. The colonel was revealing far more than she should to a cadet. "Why?" The colonel turned back to face her. "I think you're not who you claim to be. I think you're here for a specific reason. And before you deny it, I want you to know that I received a call from Naval Special Warfare Command 3 weeks ago. They wanted to confirm that a certain cadet had enrolled without any issues. Sarah's cover was blown, at least with the colonel. But this might actually be an advantage. She made a quick decision. "What do you need from me, ma'am?" Colonel Hendricks smiled slightly. "Honesty, to start with. I'm guessing you're here to investigate the leaks." "I can neither confirm nor deny that, ma'am." "Of course not," the colonel said. "But hypothetically, if you were conducting such an investigation, I could tell you that I suspect the leak is coming from one of our cadet groups. Specifically, a group led by Jennifer Morrison and Derek Hastings." Sarah sat forward slightly. "What makes you suspect them?" "Derek's father is General Hastings. He has access to high-level intelligence. 3 months ago, Derek came home for a weekend visit. 2 days later, information from one of his father's briefings appeared on a foreign intelligence forum. The connection isn't proven, but the timing is suspicious." Sarah asked. "Her mother is a defense contractor. She's working on classified weapons systems. Jennifer has visited her mother's office several times. We've since discovered that some of her mother's security clearances were compromised." Sarah processed this information. "You think they're working together? Stealing information from their parents?" Colonel Hendricks shook her head. "I think they're being manipulated. Someone is using them, probably without their knowledge. Someone clever enough to make them think they're sharing harmless information? Do you have any suspects?" "That's where I was hoping you could help," the colonel said. "You're closer to their age. You can move in their circles in ways I cannot. The incident on the roof, while unfortunate, has actually put you on their radar. They're interested in you now." Sarah understood. The mission had just expanded. It wasn't just about observing anymore. She needed to get close to Jen and Derek, needed to figure out who was pulling their strings. "I'll need to change my approach," Sarah said. "I've been trying to stay under the radar. Now, I'll need to engage more directly."
Ow!
The colonel nodded. "I'll provide what support I can, but you need to be careful. Whoever is behind this is dangerous. They've already proven they're willing to commit treason. They won't hesitate to harm anyone who gets in their way." After leaving the colonel's office, Sarah returned to her dormitory room. Her roommates weren't there, giving her time to think. The mission had just become significantly more complicated. She needed to infiltrate Jen's inner circle without revealing her true capabilities. It would require a delicate balance. That evening, Sarah made her first move. She found Jen and Emma in the common room, studying for an upcoming tactics exam. Sarah approached with her textbook and notes. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "I'm struggling with this material." Jen looked up, surprised. "I thought you preferred to study alone." Sarah shrugged. "I'm not doing great on my own. Thought I might learn something from you too." Emma glanced at Jen, who seemed to be considering the request. Finally, Jen gestured to an empty chair. "Sure, why not? Pull up a seat." For the next 2 hours, Sarah asked questions and took notes. She deliberately got several answers wrong. Let them correct her, praise their knowledge. She could see Jen's attitude slowly shifting from suspicion to something approaching acceptance. By the end of the study session, Emma was actually laughing at one of Sarah's self-deprecating jokes. As they packed up their books, Jen said, "You know, you're not as weird as I thought. That thing on the roof, with the wall, that was actually pretty impressive." Sarah smiled slightly. "I was terrified the whole time. I just didn't want to show it. It was the right thing to say." Jen nodded approvingly. "That's the attitude you need here. Never let them see you're scared." Over the next week, Sarah continued to build the relationship. She started eating meals with Jen and Emma, joined them for study sessions, even attended a few parties. She was careful to maintain her cover, playing the role of a competent but unremarkable cadet who was just trying to fit in. Derek and his friends gradually accepted her presence. Though Brad remained hostile, still bitter about the rooftop incident, Sarah observed everything. She noted who they talked to, what they discussed, where they went when they thought no one was watching. Jen and Derek had frequent private conversations that ended abruptly when others approached. Emma seemed to be kept in the dark about whatever they were planning. The other members of their group were followers, not leaders. 2 weeks after her conversation with Colonel Hendricks, Sarah noticed something odd. Derek received a package in the mail, which wasn't unusual, except for his reaction when he opened it. His face went pale, and he immediately took the package to his room. Later that evening, Sarah saw him leaving the dormitory with a large envelope. She followed him at a distance, using skills honed in hostile territories to remain unseen. Derek walked to the academy's main library. He went inside, climbed to the third floor, and entered the special collections room. Sarah waited outside, positioning herself where she could see through the window. Derek met with someone inside, a man in his 40s, wearing civilian clothes. They spoke for several minutes. Derek handed over the envelope. The man gave Derek something in return, too small for Sarah to see clearly. When Derek left, Sarah followed the other man. He walked to the parking lot and got into a silver sedan. Sarah memorized the license plate before the car drove away. She would pass that information to her handlers and see what they could discover. The silver sedan disappeared into the evening traffic, leaving Sarah standing in the shadows of the parking lot. She pulled out her phone and quickly typed the license plate number into an encrypted message. Within seconds, the information was transmitted to her handlers at Naval Special Warfare Command. She would have answers within 24 hours about who the mysterious man was and why Derek was meeting with him. Sarah returned to the dormitory, her mind working through the possibilities. Derek's behavior suggested he knew what he was doing was wrong. The secrecy, the nervous body language, the choice of meeting location all pointed to someone who understood they were breaking rules. But was it just academy violations, or something more serious? When Sarah entered her room, she found Jen sitting on Emma's bed, the two of them looking at something on a laptop. They quickly closed it when Sarah walked in, but not before she caught a glimpse of what appeared to be technical diagrams. "Hey," Jen said, her tone casual, but her eyes watchful. "Where have you been?" Sarah set down her backpack. "Just went for a walk. Needed to clear my head after that quantum physics lecture," Emma laughed. "That was brutal, right? I swear Professor Martinez speaks in a different language." Sarah sat on her own bed and pulled out a textbook, but she was acutely aware of the tension in the room. Jen and Emma exchanged a look that Sarah pretended not to notice. Something was happening, something they were excluding her from. She needed to find a way deeper into their confidence. The next morning, Sarah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. The man Derek had met with was named Marcus Vega, a former military intelligence officer who had been dishonorably discharged 5 years earlier for attempting to sell classified information. He now worked as a private consultant, though exactly who he consulted for remained unclear. His bank accounts showed regular large deposits from shell companies with ties to foreign governments. This was bigger than Sarah had initially thought. Derek wasn't just violating academy rules. He was potentially involved in espionage. But the question remained, was he doing it knowingly, or was he being manipulated? That afternoon, Sarah had tactical training with her class. The exercise involved urban combat scenarios, navigating through a mock city while under simulated enemy fire. Sarah's team included Jen, Derek, and 2 other cadets named Michelle and Tony. They were assigned to secure a building and extract a high-value target. As they moved through the training course, Sarah watched how the team operated. Derek took command naturally, issuing orders with confidence. Jen was his second, executing his plans efficiently. But Sarah noticed something interesting. During critical moments, Jen would make suggestions, and Derek would always listen. The dynamic between them was more equal than it appeared on the surface. The exercise went smoothly until they reached the target building. The scenario called for them to breach the 2nd floor, but the stairwell was booby-trapped with training explosives. Derek studied the situation for a moment, then turned to the team. "We need an alternative route," he said. "Ideas." Sarah saw the solution immediately. There was a drainage pipe running up the side of the building, strong enough to support a person's weight. Someone could climb it to the 2nd floor and create an entry point. But suggesting it would reveal skills she was trying to hide, before she could decide, Jen pointed to the same pipe. "Someone could climb that, get to the 2nd floor, and clear a path for the rest of us." Derek nodded. "Good eye. Who's got climbing experience?" Sarah remained silent. Tony spoke up. "I rock climb on weekends. I could do it." But as Tony approached the pipe, one of the instructors shook his head. "Equipment failure," he announced. "Your climbing gear is non-functional. You need an alternative solution." The team stood there, stumped. The timer was ticking down. They would fail the exercise if they didn't act soon. Sarah made a calculated decision. She stepped forward. "I can climb it without equipment," she said. "I grew up doing this kind of thing." Derek looked skeptical. "It's at least 20 feet. You sure?" Sarah nodded. She approached the pipe, tested its strength with her hands, then began to climb. She deliberately made it look difficult, grunting with effort, taking longer than necessary. But she reached the second-floor window and pulled herself through. From there, she cleared the simulated threats and opened a safe route for her team. They completed the exercise with time to spare. As they walked back to the debriefing area, Derek clapped Sarah on the shoulder. "That was solid work, Chen. I underestimated you." Jen was watching Sarah with that calculating expression again. "You keep surprising us," she said. "First the roof, now this. You're more capable than you let on." Sarah shrugged. "I just do what needs to be done." At 9 o'clock, Sarah entered the library. The building was nearly empty, just a few dedicated students scattered among the stacks. She climbed to the third floor and found the study room. Derek was there with Jen and two people Sarah had never seen before. The first was Marcus Vega, the man Derek had met with in the parking lot. He was in his 40s, with gray hair and cold eyes. The second was a woman in her 30s, Asian, professionally dressed. Neither of them looked like they belonged at a military academy. "Sarah Chen," Derek said. "Meet our associates. Marcus handles logistics. Lin handles technical analysis." The woman named Lin looked Sarah up and down. "Derek says you're good with technical documents. What's your background?" Sarah had prepared for this question. "My father worked in aerospace engineering before he died. He used to bring home blueprints, teach me how to read them. It's how I learned to visualize complex systems." It was partially true. Her father had been an engineer, though not in aerospace. The lie was close enough to her real background to be convincing. Lin pulled out a tablet and showed Sarah a series of documents. "Tell me what you see here." Sarah studied the images carefully. They were schematics for advanced radar systems, communications equipment, and weapons platforms. All classified. All currently in use by the United States military. She recognized them from her own briefings, but she couldn't let them know that. "These are radar and communication systems," Sarah said, keeping her voice uncertain. "The notation suggests they're military grade, but some of these symbols are unfamiliar to me." Lin smiled. "That's because they're using updated classification markers. The basic designs are older, but these modifications are recent. We need someone who can help us understand the improvements, the weaknesses, the operational parameters." Sarah let confusion show on her face. "I don't understand. Why are you analyzing American military systems?" Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice smooth and practiced. "We're defense consultants. We work with allied nations to help them develop their own defensive capabilities. The United States shares certain technologies with allies through official channels, but the process is slow and bureaucratic. We facilitate faster information exchange." It was a lie, but a clever one. Wrapped in enough truth to be plausible, Sarah pretended to consider this explanation. "Which allies?" she asked. "That's confidential," Marcus replied. "What you need to know is that this work is sanctioned at the highest levels. Derek's father knows what we're doing. Jennifer's mother has approved our access to certain materials. Everything is legal and proper." Another lie. General Hastings and Mrs. Morrison almost certainly had no idea their children were being used as intelligence sources. But Derek and Jen seemed to believe it. Sarah could see it in their faces, the way they nodded along with Marcus's explanation. They had been perfectly manipulated, convinced they were serving their country while actually betraying it. Jen spoke up. "Sarah, we're not asking you to do anything wrong. We're just asking you to use your skills to help interpret technical information. You'll be paid well, and you'll be making connections that will help your career." Sarah made a show of reluctance. "I need to think about this. It feels like there's a lot you're not telling me." Lynn's expression hardened. You don't have time to think. We're on a deadline. Either you're in or you're out, but once you leave this room, the offer is withdrawn permanently. The pressure tactic was obvious, but effective. Sarah could see how it had worked on Derek and Jen, pushing them to commit before they had time to fully consider the implications. How much are we talking about? Sarah asked. Marcus pulled out an envelope. $5,000 for tonight's work. More for future projects. All cash, untraceable. It was a significant amount for a college-age cadet. Enough to clear debts, buy a car, live comfortably. Sarah understood the appeal. She also understood that accepting the money would make her complicit in their eyes, bind her to the group through shared guilt. What exactly do you need me to do? Sarah asked. Lynn handed her a folder. These are maintenance logs for radar installations along the eastern seaboard. We need you to identify patrol patterns, weak points in coverage, and any upcoming system upgrades. Can you do that? Sarah opened the folder. The documents inside were genuine military records, classified secret. Someone with high-level access had provided them. She looked up at the group, letting uncertainty show on her face. This is classified material. How did you get this? Derek stepped forward. That's not your concern. Your job is just to analyze what we give you. Nothing more. Sarah closed the folder. I need a guarantee that this won't come back on me. If this is legal, like you say, then you should have no problem putting that in writing. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We don't work with written contracts. Everything operates on trust. You trust us to pay you and protect you. We trust you to do the work and keep quiet. That's how this relationship functions. Sarah could feel the pressure building. She needed to accept to maintain her cover. But she also needed to establish herself as someone who asked questions, someone who wouldn't simply follow orders blindly. It would make her more credible in the long run. I want to talk to Derek alone, she said. Marcus and Lynn exchanged glances. Jen started to protest, but Derek held up his hand. Give us 5 minutes, he said. The three adults left the study room. Derek turned to Sarah, frustration evident on his face. What's your problem, Chen? This is easy money for easy work. Sarah kept her voice low. My problem is that I'm not stupid. Those documents are classified. Analyzing them for outside parties, even allied nations, requires proper authorization. If we don't have that authorization, then we're committing espionage. Derek's confidence wavered for just a moment. Marcus says everything is cleared through official channels. Then show me the authorization, Sarah pressed. Show me something official that says this is approved. Derek looked away. It doesn't work like that. My father operates at levels where things aren't always documented. Plausible deniability and all that? Sarah softened her tone. Derek, I like you. I want to help. But I also don't want to end up in federal prison. I need more assurance that this is legitimate. Derek pulled out his phone and made a call. He spoke quietly for a minute, then handed the phone to Sarah. Someone wants to talk to you. Sarah took the phone. A man's voice came through, authoritative and confident. Miss Chen, my name is Richard Hastings. I'm Derek's father. My son tells me you have concerns about the work we're asking you to do. Sarah's mind raced. Was this really General Hastings? Or was it someone impersonating him to give the operation credibility? Yes, sir, Sarah said carefully. I just want to make sure everything's above board. I appreciate your caution, the voice replied. What Derek and his associates are doing is part of a sanctioned intelligence sharing program. I can't go into details over an unsecure line, but I can assure you that your work will be serving American interests. This was convincing. The tone, the vocabulary, the way he spoke, all matched what Sarah would expect from a senior military officer. But something felt off. A real general wouldn't be making phone calls to reassure nervous cadets about classified projects. Thank you, sir, Sarah said. That helps clarify things. She handed the phone back to Derek, who looked relieved. Satisfied? Sarah nodded slowly. I'll do it. But I want to be clear, the first sign that this isn't what you say it is, I'm out. Derek smiled and clapped her on the shoulder. Fair enough. Let's get Marcus and Lynn back in here. For the next 2 hours, Sarah analyzed the documents they had provided. She gave them accurate but incomplete information, enough to seem competent, but not enough to compromise actual security. She pointed out obvious patterns in the radar coverage, identified maintenance schedules, and noted equipment specifications. All information that a skilled analyst could have derived from the documents, but she also made note of what they were most interested in. They asked detailed questions about blind spots, about timing of patrol changes, about vulnerabilities in the communication networks. These weren't the questions of allies building defensive systems. These were the questions of adversaries planning attacks. At midnight, Lynn finally closed her laptop. "Good work, Ms. Chen. Your analysis is valuable." Marcus handed Sarah the envelope of cash. "We'll be in touch for future projects. In the meantime, keep this confidential. Don't talk about it with anyone, not even other cadets involved in the program." Sarah took the money, feeling its weight in her hands. Blood money, paid for betraying her country, even if Derek and Jen didn't see it that way yet. After Marcus and Lynn left, Derek walked Sarah back, toward the dormitories. "You did great tonight. I knew you had potential. Who else is involved in this?" Sarah asked. "You mentioned other cadets." Derek shook his head. "That's compartmentalized information. We each work on our own pieces. It's safer that way." Sarah spent the rest of the night documenting everything that had happened. She photographed the cache, recorded her observations about Marcus and Lynn, and transmitted the information through secure channels to Commander Reynolds. By dawn, she had provided enough evidence to confirm that Derek and Jen were involved in a sophisticated espionage operation, though they appeared to be unwitting participants. The response from Reynolds came quickly. Federal agents would be monitoring Marcus and Lynn, tracking their movements and communications. But they couldn't move yet. They needed to identify the full network, everyone involved, before making arrests. That meant Sarah had to go deeper, had to become more valuable to the operation, so they would reveal more of their structure. Over the next week, Sarah was called to 3 more analysis sessions. Each time, the documents became more sensitive, the questions more specific. She was being tested, her loyalty and capabilities evaluated. Sarah walked a careful line, providing enough quality work to seem valuable, while ensuring that nothing she shared could actually compromise national security. During this time, she noticed changes in the academy, small things that most people wouldn't catch. Cadets having whispered conversations that stopped when others approached, unexplained absences from training sessions, a general atmosphere of tension that seemed to permeate certain social circles. Emma avoided Sarah almost entirely now. The few times they were in the same room, Emma looked miserable, her face drawn and pale. Sarah wanted to reach out to her, to try to extract her from the situation. But any obvious approach might alert Derek and Jen that something was wrong. On Thursday evening, Sarah was in the library when she noticed Brad, the cadet who had tried to push her off the roof, meeting with Marcus in a corner reading room. Sarah positioned herself where she could observe without being seen. The conversation was brief. Marcus handed Brad a package. Brad handed over what looked like a flash drive. They parted ways without any sign of familiarity, as if they were strangers. Sarah followed Brad when he left. He went straight to the computer lab, where he logged into one of the secure terminals used for classified research projects. Whatever was on that flash drive, Brad was uploading it to the Academy's classified network. Sarah made note of the time and terminal number, information that could be used to track exactly what had been accessed. That night, Sarah was awakened by her phone buzzing. It was a text from an unknown number, Rooftop. "Now, come alone." Sarah dressed quickly and quietly. She slipped a small knife into her boot, more for comfort than actual use. The dormitory was silent as she made her way to the roof access door. Someone had left it propped open again. When Sarah stepped onto the roof, she found Jen waiting alone. The blonde cadet was standing near the wall where Sarah had stood during the initiation, her silhouette dark against the city lights below. "I needed to talk to you privately," Jen said without turning around. "Away from Derek, away from everyone else." Sarah approached carefully. "What's this about?" Jen finally turned to face her. In the moonlight, Sarah could see tears on her cheeks. "I think we've made a terrible mistake. Derek and I with Marcus and Lynn, With all of it? Sarah kept her voice gentle. What makes you think that? I've been doing research, Jen said, her voice shaking. Marcus Vega was discharged from the military for trying to sell information. He's not a consultant. He's a criminal. And Lin, her real name is Lin Wei, she works for a Chinese intelligence service. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. How did you find this out? I got suspicious after our last meeting. The questions they were asking, they didn't make sense if they were really working with allies. So I started digging. I used my mother's security clearance to access personnel files. That's when I found out the truth about Marcus. Does Derek know? Sarah asked. Jen shook her head. I tried to tell him, but he won't listen. He's convinced his father approved everything. But I called my mother's office today. They have no record of any consulting contract with Marcus Vega or anyone associated with him. Sarah, we've been selling classified information to foreign intelligence services. We're traitors. The word hung in the air between them. Sarah could see Jen's whole world collapsing around her. The privileged young woman who had seemed so confident just weeks ago was now broken, facing the reality of what she had done. We need to stop this, Sarah said firmly. We need to go to the authorities and tell them everything. I can't, Jen whispered. Do you know what will happen to me? To Derek? We'll spend the rest of our lives in prison. Our families will be destroyed. Everything we've worked for, everything we are, it's all gone. Sarah moved closer. The longer you wait, the worse it gets. Every day you don't come forward, you're committing new crimes. But if you cooperate now, if you help identify everyone involved, it might make a difference. Jen laughed bitterly. You think they'll show mercy because I cooperate? They'll make an example of me. General's son and defense contractor's daughter caught in espionage ring. It's the kind of headline they dream about. What's your alternative? Sarah asked. Keep going? Wait until you're caught, because you will be caught eventually. Jen turned back to the edge of the roof. Maybe there's another option. Maybe if I just disappear, the investigation stops. No more source, no more leaked information. Sarah realized with horror what Jen was suggesting. Don't even think about it. Killing yourself doesn't fix anything. It just leaves everyone else to clean up your mess. At least my family wouldn't have to watch me go to prison, Jen said. Sarah grabbed Jen's arm and pulled her away from the edge. Listen to me. I know this seems impossible right now, but there are options. There are ways through this that don't end with you dead or in prison for life.
Ow.
Jen pulled away. How would you know? You're just another cadet. What do you understand about any of this? Sarah made a decision. She had to break cover, at least partially, to save Jen's life. I'm not just another cadet. I was sent here to investigate the information leaks. I work for naval intelligence. Jen stared at her, shock replacing despair on her face. You're a spy? This whole time you've been investigating us. I've been investigating the leaks, Sarah corrected. I didn't know it was you and Derek until recently. And I can tell you that there's a difference between being a foolish kid who got manipulated and being an actual traitor. You and Derek are victims too. Marcus and Lynn exploited you. That matters, does it? Jen asked bitterly. I still handed over classified documents. I still took money for it. The law doesn't care about my intentions. The law cares about cooperation, Sarah said. Right now, Marcus and Lynn are still operating. They're still recruiting other cadets. If you help us stop them, if you provide evidence that leads to arrests, that counts for something. It won't make everything go away, but it's better than the alternative. Jen was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. What do I need to do? First, you get away from this edge and promise me you're not going to hurt yourself. Then, tomorrow morning, we go talk to Colonel Hendricks together. You tell her everything. After that, you'll probably be contacted by federal investigators. You tell them everything too? Complete honesty? Complete cooperation? What about Derek? Jen asked. He needs to make the same choice. Can you convince him? Jen shook her head. I don't know. He's so convinced that his father approved everything. Facing the truth means accepting that his father either didn't know or didn't care. I'm not sure he can handle that, Sarah understood. Derek's entire identity was built around his father's legacy. Learning that he had betrayed that legacy, even unknowingly, would be devastating. Try to talk to him, Sarah said. But if he won't listen, you need to save yourself. You can't protect him if it means destroying your own life. They left the roof together. Sarah walked Jen back to their dormitory, making sure she was settled before going to her own bed. Sleep didn't come easily. Sarah knew that the next 24 hours would determine the outcome of the entire operation. The next morning, Sarah was awakened by shouting in the hallway. She rushed out to find cadets gathered around someone's phone, watching a news broadcast. Her stomach dropped when she saw the headline, "General Richard Hastings arrested in espionage investigation." The reporter was describing how federal agents had raided the general's home at dawn, taking him into custody for allegedly sharing classified information with foreign intelligence services. According to the report, investigators had been monitoring him for months, building a case that connected him to a network of spies operating within military academies and defense contractors. Sarah immediately looked for Derek. She found him in his room, staring at his laptop screen in shock. Jen was sitting next to him, holding his hand. Both of them looked destroyed. "They arrested my father," Derek said numbly. "They're saying he was a spy, that he was working with Chinese intelligence." Sarah sat down across from them. "Derek, I need you to listen carefully. What they're saying about your father, it might be true. Or it might be that he was manipulated the same way you were. But either way, you need to think about your own situation now." Derek looked up at her, his eyes red. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus Vega and Lin Wei," Sarah said. "They used you to get information. Whether your father was involved or not, you were part of their operation. The FBI is going to come looking for you next." Derek stood up suddenly, anger replacing shock. "You think I'm a spy? You think I betrayed my country?" "I think you were manipulated," Sarah said calmly. "I think they convinced you that you were serving American interests when you were actually serving theirs. But the authorities won't care about that distinction unless you cooperate with them." Jen spoke up. "She's right, Derek. I told you last night. Marcus and Lin aren't who they claim to be. They're enemy agents, and we help them." Derek looked between them, confusion and fear warring on his face. "How do you know all this?" Sarah decided it was time for complete honesty. "Because I was sent here to investigate the information leaks. I'm a naval intelligence operative. I've been gathering evidence on Marcus and Lin for weeks." Derek stumbled backward as if he had been struck. "You're a spy? You've been spying on us?" "I've been doing my job," Sarah said firmly. "And right now my job is to give you a chance to make this right. Come with me and Jen to Colonel Hendricks. Tell her everything. Cooperate with the federal investigation. It's the only way through this." For a moment, Sarah thought Derek might run. His eyes darted toward the door, his body tensing for flight. But then Jen grabbed his arm. "Please, Derek," she said. "We have to face this. Running will only make it worse." Derek's shoulders sagged in defeat. "Okay, I'll talk to them." The three of them walked together to the administration building. Colonel Hendricks was waiting in her office, along with 2 FBI agents. The next several hours were a blur of questions, statements, and revelations. Derek and Jen provided detailed accounts of their involvement with Marcus and Lin, identifying other cadets who had been recruited, describing the types of information that had been shared. Sarah watched as the scope of the operation became clear. Marcus and Lin had infiltrated not just this academy, but 3 others across the country. They had recruited dozens of cadets, most of them children of high-ranking military officers or defense industry executives. The operation had been running for over 2 years, collecting massive amounts of classified information. By evening, arrest warrants had been issued for Marcus Vega, Lin Wei, and 17 others involved in the network. Federal agents were conducting raids across multiple states. The scope of the investigation was staggering, one of the largest espionage cases in decades. Sarah was finally released from the debriefing session near midnight. She walked across the empty academy grounds, exhausted but satisfied that the mission had been successful. The leak had been identified and stopped. Derek and Jen would face consequences for their actions. They would also be credited with cooperation that helped break up a major spy ring. The academy transformed overnight. What had been a prestigious military institution known for producing future leaders suddenly became ground zero for one of the largest espionage scandals in American history. News vans lined the streets outside the gates. Reporters shouted questions at anyone entering or leaving. The atmosphere inside was thick with suspicion and fear. Sarah watched it all unfold with mixed emotions. She had completed her mission successfully, but the cost was higher than she had anticipated. Derek and Jen were facing federal charges that could result in decades in prison despite their cooperation. Emma, who had never actually participated in the information sharing, was still being investigated. Brad and 3 other cadets had been arrested. The scandal had destroyed families and ruined careers. On the 3rd day after General Hastings' arrest, Sarah was called to an emergency meeting with Colonel Hendricks. The colonel's office was packed with federal agents, military investigators, and officials from various intelligence agencies. Commander Reynolds was there too, having flown in from Washington. "We have a problem," Colonel Hendricks announced once everyone was assembled. "Marcus Vega and Lin Wei have disappeared. They were tipped off before we could execute the arrest warrants. We believe they fled the country." One of the FBI agents, a stern man named Davidson, pulled up surveillance footage on a laptop. This was taken at Dulles International Airport 6 hours before the arrests. You can see Vega and Wei boarding a flight to Mexico City. From there, they likely connected to flights heading to China. Commander Reynolds looked at Sarah. Did Derek or Jen mention anything about escape plans? Any indication that Vega and Wei were preparing to run? Sarah shook her head. Nothing. They seemed confident in their operational security. I don't think Derek or Jen knew they were planning to leave. Someone warned them, Davidson said. Someone with knowledge of the investigation timeline. We're looking at everyone who had access to that information, but so far we haven't identified the source. Colonel Hendricks leaned forward. There's another concern. According to Derek's testimony, there was supposed to be a final meeting this week. A large exchange of information that would complete the current phase of their operation. We don't know what information was supposed to be handed over, but given the scale of everything else, it's likely significant. Do we know when and where this meeting was supposed to happen? Sarah asked. Derek said Thursday night, but he doesn't know the location. Vega always provided that information at the last minute, probably to prevent exactly this kind of interdiction. Davidson closed his laptop. Without Vega and Wei, we can't make the final arrests. We've rolled up the cadet network, but the people at the top of this operation are still out there. Whoever Vega and Wei were reporting to, whoever was financing this whole thing, they're still operational. Commander Reynolds turned to Sarah. We need to draw them out. Make them think the operation is still viable. Sarah understood immediately what was being suggested. You want me to go to the meeting? Pretend to be one of the recruited cadets. It's dangerous, Reynolds admitted. If they've been following the news, they know the network has been compromised. They'll be cautious, possibly hostile. But if we can convince them that one source is still active, they might try to salvage the operation. Colonel Hendricks added, we'd provide full tactical support. FBI hostage rescue team on standby, surveillance in place. You wouldn't be alone out there. Sarah considered the risks. She would be walking into a meeting with foreign intelligence operatives who now knew they were being hunted. They would be desperate, possibly violent. But it was also an opportunity to complete the mission fully, to capture not just the middlemen, but the actual controllers of the operation. I'll do it, Sarah said. But I'll need Derek's help to make it convincing. Derek was brought to a secure conference room an hour later. He looked terrible, having barely slept since his father's arrest. His hands shook as he sat down across from Sarah and the assembled investigators. Derek, Sarah began gently, we need your help with something. We need you to contact Marcus Vega. Derek's eyes widened. I can't do that. He's gone. The news said he fled the country, Sarah said. But we think he'll still check his messages, at least for a few more days. He'll want to know if any of his network is still operational. You're going to tell him that you have one more piece of information to share? Something big. And you're going to set up a meeting. Derek shook his head. He'll know it's a trap. He's not stupid. FBI agent Davidson leaned forward. Derek, you're facing serious federal charges? Espionage. providing classified information to foreign agents. Conspiracy. We're talking about 20 to 30 years in prison. But if you cooperate fully, if you help us complete this investigation, we can recommend a reduced sentence. Maybe even probation with community service if the judge is sympathetic. You want me to be bait? Derek said flatly. We want you to help us catch the people who used you, Sarah corrected. The people who destroyed your father's career and your future. Don't you want them to face justice? Derek was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. What do I need to say? Over the next hour, they crafted a carefully worded message. Derek would claim that he had obtained information about a new stealth aircraft program before being questioned by investigators. He would say that he managed to hide the data and was now willing to trade it for help leaving the country. The message was designed to be appealing enough to draw a response, but not so perfect as to seem suspicious. Derek sent the message through the encrypted channel Marcus had set up. Then they waited. 2 days passed with no response. Sarah began to think that Vega was too smart to take the bait, that he had abandoned all his assets and was safely hidden somewhere beyond American reach. But on the third day, Derek's phone buzzed with a new message. Thursday night, 11 p.m. Old Warehouse District on Harrison Street. Come alone. Bring the data. We'll provide transportation out of the country. The trap was set. The Warehouse District was a collection of abandoned industrial buildings on the edge of the city. Most of the structures were scheduled for demolition, making it an ideal location for a clandestine meeting. The FBI had 3 days to prepare, installing surveillance equipment and positioning tactical teams in the surrounding buildings. Sarah spent those 3 days reviewing every detail of the operation. She studied the warehouse layouts, memorized escape routes, and ran through dozens of scenarios with the tactical team. She also trained Derek on what to expect, how to behave, what to say if things went wrong. On Thursday evening, Sarah and Derek drove to the Warehouse District in Derek's car. The sun had just set, casting long shadows across the empty streets. Behind them, invisible in the darkness, dozens of federal agents followed in unmarked vehicles. They parked outside the designated warehouse, a 3-story building with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. Sarah had a small transmitter hidden in her jacket, broadcasting everything back to the command center. She also had a weapon concealed at the small of her back, though she hoped she wouldn't need to use it. You ready? Sarah asked Derek. He nodded, though his face was pale. Let's get this over with. They entered the warehouse through a side door. The interior was dark and smelled of rust and decay. Sarah's eyes adjusted quickly, taking in the layout. Large pieces of industrial equipment were scattered around the floor. A metal staircase led to a second-level catwalk. Derek Hastings, a voice called from above. You're late. Sarah looked up to see a figure standing on the catwalk. It wasn't Marcus Vega or Lin Wei. It was someone she had never seen before. A tall man in dark clothing with what appeared to be a weapon holstered at his hip. Traffic, Derek replied, his voice shaking slightly. Where's the data? The man asked. Derek held up a flash drive. Right here. But first, I want to see my transportation arrangements. How are you getting me out of the country? The man descended the stairs slowly. As he got closer, Sarah could see his face clearly. He was Middle Eastern, possibly Iranian or Iraqi, with cold eyes and a professional bearing. This was no amateur. This was someone with serious training. First, the data, the man said, extending his hand. Derek hesitated. I need guarantees. How do I know you won't just take this and leave me here? The man smiled without humor. You don't. But you also don't have any other options. The FBI is looking for you. Your father is in custody. Your only chance of avoiding prison is to disappear completely. We can make that happen. Sarah watched the exchange carefully, waiting for her moment. The tactical team was positioned outside, ready to breach on her signal, but they needed to identify everyone involved in the meeting before moving in. Is it just you? Sarah asked suddenly. Where's Marcus? The man's eyes shifted to her. Who are you? Friend of Derek's, Sarah replied. I'm helping him get out of this mess. But I want to make sure this is legitimate before we hand over anything. The man studied her for a long moment. Marcus and Lynn had to leave the country quickly. I'm handling the final logistics. Now give me the data, or this meeting is over. Sarah nodded to Derek, who stepped forward with the flash drive. As the man reached for it, Sarah's combat instincts kicked in. She noticed the subtle shift in his weight, the way his other hand moved toward his weapon. He wasn't planning to let them leave alive. Sarah moved first. She grabbed the man's wrist and twisted, using his own momentum against him. The weapon clattered to the floor as Sarah swept his legs. He went down hard, but he was trained too. He rolled and came up in a defensive stance. Federal agent. Sarah shouted, her own weapon now drawn. On the ground now. The man didn't comply. Instead, he reached into his jacket. Sarah didn't hesitate. She fired twice, center mass. The man dropped, his weapon falling from his hand unfired. Breach, breach, breach. Sarah heard through her earpiece. Seconds later, the warehouse filled with federal agents, lights blazing, voices shouting commands. Sarah kept her weapon trained on the downed man while agents secured the scene. Medics rushed in, but she could tell from the man's position that her shots had been fatal. Her training had taken over, years of combat experience guiding her hands. She had done what was necessary to protect herself and Derek. Agent Davidson approached, his face grim. You did good, Chen. He was reaching for a weapon. Clean shoot. Derek was sitting against a wall, looking shocked. Sarah holstered her weapon and moved to check on him. You okay? You killed him, Derek said numbly. You just killed him. He was going to kill us, Sarah said quietly. Both of us. That's what happens when you play with real spies, Derek. These aren't games. The warehouse was soon swarming with investigators. They found the man's identification, though it was almost certainly fake. His fingerprints were run through every database available, but he didn't match any known intelligence operatives. Whoever he was, he had been careful to erase his past. More concerning was what they found in his vehicle: airplane tickets to Beijing, $50,000 in cash, and a detailed file on every cadet who had been involved in the spy ring. This wasn't just about recovering data. This was about eliminating witnesses. Commander Reynolds arrived at the scene an hour later. She pulled Sarah aside, away from the chaos of the investigation. The man you shot was named Qasim Rahman. According to CIA, he's a freelance operative who works for the highest bidder, usually Chinese intelligence, but he's been connected to operations for Russia, Iran, and North Korea as well. So this whole thing was bigger than just China? Sarah asked. Much bigger, Reynolds confirmed. Marcus and Lynn were probably working for Chinese intelligence, but Al-Rahman's presence suggests there were other players involved. We may have just uncovered a multinational espionage operation. Sarah felt exhausted. What had started as a simple investigation into Academy information leaks had exploded into something far more complex. What happens now? Now we dig deeper, Reynolds said. Al-Rahman's death means we lost a valuable source, but his phone and computer are being analyzed. We'll trace his contacts, follow the money, and identify everyone else involved in this network. 3 months later, Sarah Chen stood in a secure briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters. The room was filled with senior military officials, intelligence directors, and federal prosecutors. On the screen behind her, complex diagrams showed the full extent of the espionage network she had helped dismantle. Commander, Reynolds gestured to the display. Thanks to the work of Petty Officer Chen and our investigative team, we've identified and arrested 37 individuals involved in this operation. We've recovered over 10,000 classified documents and prevented the transfer of critical intelligence regarding weapon systems, troop deployments, and strategic defense plans. Sarah watched as the diagram highlighted each arrested operative. Marcus Vega and Lin Wei remained at large, believed to be in China, but most of their network had been rolled up. The cadets, who had been manipulated, were facing reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. Derek and Jen were serving 2 years probation with community service requirements. Emma had been cleared of all charges after it was determined. She had no active role in the information sharing. The most significant arrest had been General Richard Hastings. The investigation revealed that he hadn't been a willing participant in the espionage. but rather a victim of a sophisticated honey trap operation. Lin Wei had seduced him during a defense industry conference, then used compromising photographs to coerce him into providing access to classified briefings. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, but at least he wouldn't spend the rest of his life in prison. Petty Officer Chen, Admiral Morrison said, standing from his seat at the head of the table. Your performance during this operation was exemplary. You maintained your cover under extremely difficult circumstances, gathered critical intelligence, and ultimately prevented a foreign operative from eliminating witnesses. On behalf of the United States Navy and the intelligence community, thank you for your service. The room erupted in applause. Sarah stood at attention, uncomfortable with the recognition. She had done her job, nothing more. The real heroes were the investigators who had spent months tracing financial records and communications, the tactical teams who had risked their lives during the arrests, the prosecutors who were building cases that would ensure the guilty parties faced justice. After the briefing, Sarah was approached by a man she didn't recognize. He was in his 60s, wearing civilian clothes, with the bearing of someone who had spent a lifetime in the intelligence world. Petty Officer Chen, my name is Director James Hawkins. I oversee special operations for the Defense Intelligence Agency. I've been watching your career with great interest. What? Sarah shook his hand. Sir, your performance at the Academy was remarkable. Not just the investigative work, but your ability to adapt to circumstances. The tactical judgment you displayed during the warehouse operation. You have a rare skill set. Thank you, sir. Hawkins handed her a business card. I'd like to discuss future opportunities with you. Operations that would make use of your unique combination of combat experience and investigative capabilities. If you're interested, give me a call. Sarah took the card but said nothing. She wasn't sure she wanted more missions like this one. Being undercover, lying constantly, watching young people destroy their futures. It had taken a toll she hadn't expected. That evening, Sarah returned to the small apartment she maintained near the base. For the first time in months, she was truly alone, with no mission to plan for, no cover to maintain. She changed into comfortable clothes, made dinner, sat on her couch with a glass of wine. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jen Morrison. I know you probably can't respond, but I wanted to say thank you. What you did, giving us a chance to make it right, it saved my life. Literally, I was going to jump off that roof. You stopped me. You gave me hope that there was a way through the darkness. I'm rebuilding now, one day at a time. I'll never forget what you did for me. Sarah stared at the message for a long time. She had spent so much time thinking about the negative consequences of the operation that she had forgotten this part. She had saved lives, not just by stopping the espionage ring, but by pulling Jen back from the edge, by giving Derek a chance at redemption. She typed a response. You saved yourself, Jen. I just showed you the door. You're the one who had the courage to walk through it. I'm proud of you. Over the next few weeks, Sarah completed her debriefings and filed her final reports. The Academy operation was officially closed. She was reassigned to her regular SEAL team, turning to the life she knew best: training exercises, deployment preparations, and the clear moral certainty of combat operations. But something had changed in her. The Academy mission had shown her a different kind of warfare. One fought in shadows and lies where the enemy wasn't always clear, and victory came with complicated costs. She found herself thinking about Director Hawkins's offer, about whether she wanted to pursue more intelligence work. One afternoon, Sarah received a call from Colonel Hendricks. The colonel had retired from active duty in the wake of the scandal, taking responsibility for the security failures at the Academy even though the investigation had cleared her of any wrongdoing. I wanted to update you on the cadets, Hendricks said. Derek graduated last month. He's commissioned as a second lieutenant, assigned to a logistics unit. It's not the career he dreamed of, but it's honest work, and he's grateful for the chance. Jen is finishing her degree and working as a counselor for at-risk youth. She's using her experience to help kids avoid making the same mistakes she did. Sarah felt genuine happiness hearing this news. That's good. They deserved a second chance. They got it because of you, Hendricks said. You could have let them hang. Many agents would have. But you saw them as people, not just sources. That made all the difference. After the call ended, Sarah pulled out Director Hawkins's business card. She had been avoiding the decision, but she knew she couldn't put it off forever. The question wasn't whether she was capable of intelligence work. The Academy operation had proven that. The question was whether she wanted to. Sarah thought about the kids at the Academy, about Derek and Jen and Emma and all the others who had been caught up in something they didn't fully understand. She thought about the real enemies. People like Marcus Vega and Lin Wei and Kazem Al-Rahman, who preyed on the innocent and vulnerable. If she took Hawkins's offer, she would be fighting those enemies directly, preventing more young people from being exploited. She made the call. Director Hawkins, this is Petty Officer Chen. I'd like to discuss those opportunities you mentioned. 6 months later, Sarah was walking through another institution under another cover identity. This time, it was a defense contractor's headquarters, where rumors suggested another information leak was occurring. She had grown her hair out and changed her style. She moved differently, talked differently, had created an entirely new persona. But underneath the disguise, she was still the same person. A Navy SEAL. A warrior. Someone who had sworn an oath to protect her country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The battlefield had changed, but the mission remained the same. During a break, Sarah found herself on the roof of the building, looking out over the city. It reminded her of that night at the Academy, standing on the wall while Jen and her friends watched. That moment felt like a lifetime ago. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her new handler. A meeting was scheduled. A contact who claimed to have information about the leak. It could be genuine intelligence, or it could be a trap. Sarah had learned that in this world, nothing was ever certain. She took a deep breath and headed back inside. There was work to do. The years that followed would bring more operations, more covers, more victories and complications. Sarah would infiltrate organizations, build relationships, and occasionally have to use the lethal skills that had been drilled into her during SEAL training. She would save some people and watch others destroy themselves, despite her best efforts. But she never forgot the lessons from the Academy mission. Every person she encountered, no matter how compromised or guilty they appeared, was still human. They had reasons for their choices, even if those reasons were flawed. Understanding those motivations, treating sources as people rather than assets, that was what made Sarah effective at her job. On slow nights, when the loneliness of undercover work became overwhelming, Sarah would sometimes think about Derek and Jen. She wondered how they were doing, whether they had managed to build meaningful lives after their mistakes. She hoped they had found peace. Years after the Academy operation, Sarah was conducting surveillance at a charity gala. Her cover was a wealthy socialite, complete with an expensive dress and practiced small talk. She was tracking a suspected money launderer when she saw a familiar face across the room. It was Jen Morrison, older now and more confident, wearing professional attire and speaking to a group of teenagers. Sarah moved closer, careful not to be noticed, and listened to the conversation. "I made terrible choices when I was your age," Jen was saying to the teens. "I let people manipulate me. Convinced me that I was doing something noble when I was actually betraying everything I believed in. But here's what I learned. It's never too late to make things right. It's never too late to choose integrity over convenience." One of the teenagers asked, "How did you get through it, knowing you had messed up so badly?" Jen smiled. "Someone once told me that I could either let my mistakes define me or learn from them and become stronger. I chose to become stronger. It wasn't easy. There were days I wanted to give up, but I kept going, one day at a time, one right choice at a time. And eventually, I found purpose again." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She slipped away before Jen could notice her, returning to her surveillance position. But her heart felt lighter than it had in months. The mission at the Academy had cost her something, had changed her in ways she was still processing. But it had also saved lives and given people chances they wouldn't have had otherwise. That was enough. That had to be enough. Sarah continued her work, moving through the shadows of the intelligence world, protecting her country in ways that would never be publicly acknowledged. She accepted the moral complexity, the loneliness, the constant danger, because somewhere out there, Another young person was being targeted by foreign intelligence. Another family was at risk of being torn apart by espionage. Another idealistic kid was being manipulated into betraying everything they believed in. And Sarah would be there to stop it. Not because she was particularly heroic or special, but because someone had to do it. Someone had to stand in the gap between the innocent and those who would exploit them. Someone had to remember that underneath all the strategy and tactics and classified intelligence, there were human lives at stake. Sarah Chen had been many things in her life: a daughter, a SEAL, an undercover operative. But more than anything, she was someone who understood the cost of freedom, who knew that protecting her country sometimes meant protecting people from themselves, who had learned that the hardest battles weren't always fought with weapons, but with patience, understanding, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right even when it was difficult. As she left the gala that night, Sarah looked up at the stars above the city. Somewhere out there, Marcus Vega and Lin Wei were still free, still operating, still recruiting new sources and stealing secrets. They hadn't won, but they hadn't lost completely either. The war continued, endless and invisible. But Sarah wasn't afraid. She had walked on rooftop edges and faced down armed operatives. She had maintained her cover under impossible pressure and made split-second decisions that saved lives. She had been pushed to her limits and discovered that her limits were further than she had ever imagined. And if she was called to do it again, to go undercover and infiltrate another organization, to put her life on the line for her country and the innocent people caught in the crossfire of international espionage, she would do it without hesitation. Because that was who she was. That was who she had chosen to be. A warrior. A guardian. Someone who understood that the most important battles were often the ones no one ever heard about. Someone who was willing to stand alone in the darkness so that others could live in the light. Sarah Chen walked into the night ready for whatever came next. The mission never truly ended. There was always another threat, another operation, another life to save or lose. But she was ready for it. She had been trained for it. And she would face it the way she faced everything, with courage, with integrity, and with an unshakable commitment to protecting the country she loved and the people who depended on her.